and welcome to the ACISTE community conversation. We have a fun conversation today, and I'll let Katrina introduce that in just a minute. But let me introduce myself. My name is Elizabeth Sabet, and I'm the current board president of ACISTE. And if you're not familiar with what the acronym ACISTE stands for, it stands for the American Center for the Integration of Spiritually Transformative Experiences. And what we do is a twofold mission. We have a twofold mission. First and foremost, to support people who've had spiritually transformative experiences that may have changed their worldview and have had challenges integrating and being with the experience itself and perhaps the information that they received during their experiences. We do that through education, and we also have a private online forum that is not on Facebook that you can join. So if you're an experiencer and you're interested in communicating with people who had spiritually transformative experiences of all types, feel free to email me at info@ACISTE.org. Again, that's info@ACISTE.org. And I'll be happy to get you an invitation link to that private forum. The other aspect of our mission, of course, is to promote research regarding all spiritually transformative experiences. There's quite a bit of research around near-death experiences, but there's not a whole lot of research around other types of spiritually transformative experiences and the challenges in the integration process regarding those different types of experiences. So we also promote researchers. We also have an academic conference once a year for researchers and clinicians who work with experiencers to present their information and clinical best practices on how to work with experiencers in a mental health setting. We also certify mental health professionals, spiritual guidance directors, and spiritual life coaches on how to work with spiritually transformative experiencers. So right now, I'm going to turn it over to Katrina Michelle, our executive director. Katrina is a holistic mental health worker. My mouth isn't working today, Katrina, I'm sorry. She's a holistic psychotherapist in New York City. And Katrina, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So yeah, this is a conversation today is talking to people who've had spiritually transformative experiences that are related to meditation. And I think it's important that we start opening up the dialogue about the power of meditation and what it can really do for us as a spiritual practice, and what some of the things to be aware of are as we enter into the practice, as we deepen into the practice, and as helping professionals, how we can support people who are engaging in these practices. One of the things that's been happening lately is meditation has become kind of a buzzword and a fix-all for everything. So I think it's important we talk about some of the things that this practice can unlock. So I'm really excited that we can be here in this format with you and broadening our reach. ACISTE has been having our conference now annually, but for those of you who aren't able to make it to a conference, this is a way to really get the topic out there and connect with our online community. So thanks for being with us, viewers, and you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. If you want to post something in the Q&A, please do. And right now, I'd like to ask our panelists to take a few minutes to introduce themselves. Let's see, Elizabeth, our president, I'm going to turn it back to you. You'll be sitting with us as a panelist today, so I'm excited to have you share your experiences. Tell us a little bit about you that we don't know already.
All right, thank you, Katrina. Yes, I'm excited to share today as well, because meditation was such a huge part in both developing an experience or opening up to an experience, and also in integrating it as well. I work in Lubbock, Texas as a transpersonal, transformational, spiritual life coach. I work with people all over the world, and right here at home in Lubbock, Texas. And I have been a community member, co-founder of a community here in Lubbock, Texas, that provided community for people who wanted to expand and explore outside of their enculturated West Texas experience. And that lasted here for about 10 years. And then my work kind of shifted and transformed from HOPE, which was the name of that organization, into volunteering for ACISTE. I've run spiritual support groups here in town for several years, and now I'm training peer support group facilitators for ACISTE as well. I've had many experiences my whole life from the age of 5 through current day, continue to be open to the nonlinear experience. And I believe that while my childhood experiences were not necessarily directly related to devotion, although I did start seeking to understand God at the age of 9, the experiences prior to that were not due to devotional practices, but I continue to have my own devotional practices to this day. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Elizabeth. So Mansell, let's have you take a few minutes to introduce yourself to us, please.
Hi, my name is Mansell Gilmore. I am a retired progressive Episcopal bishop. I was a long-time member of a contemplative order called the Order of Alleghenies. In regards to meditation, I don't remember a time when I wasn't practicing something. I grew up in a church setting that practiced an ecstatic form of prayer, which in some ways the approach was a little unbalanced, which it allowed me to learn both positives and negatives associated with that kind of meditation practice. I've also practiced martial arts since the age of 5. And in that experience, I was exposed to Taoist practices, Buddhist practices, and Sufi practices from my instructors, which often was an integral part of the martial arts training. I was fortunate enough to grow up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and in that environment, I was wonderfully exposed to a number of different things that, again, made meditation an integral part of my life, from my earliest memories to now. I've explored a number of different forms of meditation, had major transformation experiences. During meditation prepared me for so and so. So again, meditation has been an integral part of my life.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mansell. It's great to have you with us today. And Michael, let's turn it over to you for a brief introduction. Thanks for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me. So I'm Michael Holden, and I'm here in the UK. That's where I'm from. I'm a writer. I've written for a living in various different capacities, primarily journalistic, but many other things along the line. I also work as a teacher at film school here in London sometimes. I think in comparative context to the rest of you, I'm a comparative newcomer to what we might call deliberate meditation, which is doing meditation, being aware of it as meditation, experiencing it as meditation. That was something that I only started to practice in I suppose a conscious way. Gosh, I think I'm not sure it's even 3 years, but quite early on in that arc of time, within a year of commencement, I got involved in quite intense practice, which resulted in some quite extraordinary for me experiences. So I guess that's what brings me here today. And I did what I've always done. It took around a year to kind of get to grips with what seemed to have happened and how I was feeling, and then I started writing about it. So it's through that writing that I got in touch with yourself. Now, other things had occurred in my life. I had instigated certain kinds of experiences one way or another, and also had a couple of flashes of kind of things that seemed slightly extraordinary when I was younger and growing up, but nothing abiding. And it's easy, I think, or it's tempting to kind of retrofit one's experiences as a very curious kid growing up, and after something's happened, and go, oh, there was a clear path to this. So I'm a little bit wary of that, but I could look back through my childhood, and now that I'm much more aware of this terrain, and say, oh yeah, it all makes sense. But seeking to make too much sense of things can not always be the right move, I think. So anyway, so that's a small sketch of who I am and why I'm here, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we never stop trying to make sense of it, even though we know it's not always necessarily the path. But okay, thanks for being with us. And let's move into our first question. So the first question is basically just tell us a little bit about how meditation played a role in your spiritually transformative experience. So Elizabeth, would you like to begin?
Sure. So I started a formal meditation and breathing practice at the age of 23, and intentionally because I had wanted all of my spiritually transformative experiences, nonlinear experiences to stop, so that I could be a mother and that I could be a focused, solid, grounded, effective mother. And so I asked God to make all of the weird stuff stop, probably about the age of 19, 20. And so I was missing my connection, and heard about meditation. There was no Buddhist teacher in Lubbock, Texas at that time. And if there was, I certainly wasn't aware of them. I dropped out of the Catholic Church, which I had grown up in, and decided to look into Buddhism and start reading about meditation. And when I started the practice at 23, of course, you know, if I could get 10 minutes at a time and for it to be effective in helping me experience a connection, it was, you know, not very effective in the beginning, but I kept it up. And eventually, after quite a few years of not getting what I thought I would get in meditation, which was direct connection, I got very frustrated and put it down and said, okay, I am not going to eat until you show up and you show me what you are. And so I went into, and I didn't know that this was a practice either, but I sat down and started calling the name of God. And I said, I'm not going to meditate the way I used to meditate anymore. I'm just going to call you like a child calling their mother until you pay attention to me. And actually, it's actually a practice. Calling the name of God over and over is actually one meditative practice. I didn't get anything for the first practice. I sat for 45 minutes during my lunch hour, didn't get anything, and I said, fine, I'm not going to eat. Second day, sat in for 45 minutes during my lunch hour and called the name of God out loud. Didn't get anything, said, fine, I'm not eating again. I'm not going to eat today. On the third day, something in the heavens took mercy on me and gave me an experience of, the first thing I noticed was an energy in a wave form out at arm's length. And when I felt the energy, I said, God, is that you? Are you a wave? And then it came and hit me directly in my chest and took my breath away. And life was never the same after that. I instantly changed. I mean, I changed overnight. My ethics changed in my own private mind of, you know, changing my thoughts to be more compassionate and kind. The things I had struggled with before instantly changed. And I became a vegetarian like overnight. And I said, well, okay, I'm not going to eat today, but tomorrow I'll eat, but I just won't eat meat. And that was weird, right? So while I had had many experiences before, that was the first of more transformational experiences to come. So.
I'm just to follow up with the way you started, do you want to just give us a summary? You said you started the meditation practice with the intention to stop the weird stuff. So maybe just give us a little summary of what that weird stuff was.
Well, no, I asked God to stop the weird stuff when I was 19 or 20. And I went for 3 years without any type of practice or experience. The weird stuff, I was something called, something would happen spontaneously that I would call quantum time jumping, that I didn't know was a thing either. I would be spontaneous, I'm just sitting at my desk at work, and I would look up and I would see, for example, somebody that I knew very well. I worked for the Workers' Compensation Commission, a state agency helping people with their workers' comp claims. And I saw somebody standing at the counter and I said, oh my gosh, so-and-so, you got hurt at work? And they looked up and said, yes, as they were filling out their form. And then snap, everything, I'm still in my desk, but everything's different. And I'm like, okay, that was weird. And that guy wasn't standing there. You know, those are the things that make you wonder if you're schizophrenic or not. Those are the scary things. Those are very scary. Now, had the next day not happened, 24 hours later not happened, I would have thought I was schizophrenic and I needed to get some medication. But the very next day, that happened exactly as it had happened 24 hours before when he wasn't really there. So those are the types of weird experiences. You know, my whole goal in life at that time was to be a good mother, a mother that raised healthy, well-loved children that went out into the world and did good and had, you know, good lives. And quantum time jumping or being schizophrenic, it's not, you know, conducive to being grounded and present to raise your children. So I was like, yeah, this stuff's got to stop. So that's an example of the weird stuff.
Yes, thanks for clarifying. And yeah, the integration is a process over time for all of that, I'm sure. Okay, so Mansell, tell us a little bit about how meditation impacted your spiritual transformative experience.
Well, like I said earlier, I mean, it was something that I grew up with, something that was integral to my sense of self, my sense of spirituality, if you will. When I was younger and growing up into my late adolescence and early 20s, meditation, prayer, anything that I could use was aimed specifically at deepening my relationship with God. And there was no other emphasis on that for me, deepening my relationship with God. And over time, my conceptions of God would evolve, and my specific ideas of God would loosen. And a lot of that came through meditation. Everything, like I was saying earlier, the ecstatic practices of my childhood, as Elizabeth did, calling out the name of God, chanting the name of God, if you will. Aching and drawing in what's called the infilling of the Holy Spirit, where you're suffused with this presence, if you will, this thing, this energy. Glossolalia is a practice that I embraced when I was less than 10 years old.
Do you want to just clarify what that is for those who might not be familiar?
Most often it's called speaking in tongues, but it's kind of allowing yourself to just utter sound. It comes out in a kind of gibberish usually. but to utilize it as meditation, it has to come from it. My views on these things, of course, have evolved over the years. But those were all central to all of that, was a deepening of my relationship with God, including the meditation I learned through martial arts. It came to be practicing martial arts as a form of prayer. This deep meditation, swimming in the presence of God is the way I viewed it. And over the years, it's evolved. I learned more specific, intentional technique through other disciplines, and was able to utilize that. One of the things that made meditation so important to me is the fact that I have PTSD, and I have PTSD that results from childhood trauma. So I don't remember a time that I was not traumatized. And so meditation was a way of finding balance within myself, coming to terms with who I was. It was and is a practice that allows me to take steps forward in my healing process, which has forced me to embrace some deeper forms of meditation that are hard and difficult and painful. And I've never been one to really center my meditation practices on relaxation or finding peace, if you will. It's always been taking a step forward in my growth. And that's happened throughout my life. And it continues to happen. It's something that I still practice. So.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey, and I appreciate you bringing up the history of trauma, because I think that's something we're gonna get into a little bit in terms of how, you know, meditation might play a role in having to dive into managing all of that. So thanks for sharing that piece. And Michael, so for those who might not know you, we came into contact because you had written this piece, which was published in Esquire magazine first, I believe, about your experience at a Vipassana meditation retreat. So I know you've had other experiences as well, but I think it'd be really interesting to hear you tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, no, if we want to focus on the meditation-based stuff. So I had, for sort of numerous personal reasons, I suppose, and probably because of how I'd been feeling, certain things that my life had kind of arranged itself, or I'd arranged it in a particular way, and I really started to look for something. I think I needed something different. I also had an organic curiosity about doing something different. So I wanted to develop some kind of practice, and so I just began benignly, having done lots of reading, doing 15 minutes of basic sitting a day, and I found that to be really great and immediately efficacious. I felt better. I liked the fact that I had a kind of an extra thing to do, didn't resemble all the other things I'd done. The kind of contextual and experiential difference between a period of meditation and what constitutes the average urban, self-employed, neurotic person's day like mine is quite tangible, quite quickly. And so it's just in and as of itself, it began to feel like a positive and quite quickly quite a cherished kind of space, really. And the insight that developed in terms of, you know, an awareness and a perspective on the processes of who you think you are, or who we take ourselves to be, and the mechanics of that once observed in a clear and deliberate fashion. I think certainly in a kind of curious, investigative, slightly obsessional mind like mine, just made me want to go deeper. And then I found out about Vipassana through some authors whose work I admired, and they were, you know, these were journalistic authors, not people specifically known for their interest in what we might think of as so-called spiritual practice or stuff like that. So I could see that lots of, and I guess this is how any human being comes to anything, people with whom I had some kind of, that I identified with, made me feel safe about going further without me having to kind of believe any of my own propaganda about whether I was getting into anything that was like too weird. So so I signed up for the Vipassana retreat in the UK, which is no mean feat. I mean, they're very popular, they're free. If you've ever tried, you know, to buy a ticket for like a popular concert that goes on sale at a particular time, it's hard. You have to be online and say you want to do it. And so, yeah, so I think I tried a couple of times and was unsuccessful. And then I was successful. And then so some time passed. I went on the retreat, which is a 10-day program. I guess 11 days maybe with your first day built in of silent meditation. The meditation clock's up to about 11 hours a day, which is a substantial program. Your food intake is quite limited. The diet is vegetarian. I'd given up meat and fish in preparation for the retreat because I didn't want what I experienced to be kind of, to have some sense of lack linked to what I was or wasn't eating. And you pretty much stop eating after midday, and you woke up at 4 a.m. and, you know, and there's a very well organized regimen that you go through around those experiences. And so I went there, you know, very enthusiastically, and after, I guess, 5 or 6 days of that, then I began to feel what I suppose is best described as a shift in consciousness. And it's a remarkable, there are other corollary experiences, I think, to meditating with a large group of people in the same way, on the same schedule. There's something that happens in any crowd, in any group of people, when you're responding to a kind of a similar event. So there's all kinds of other things I think that apply into that. It's a very unusual thing for someone in the here and now of the 21st century to spend that much time quietly with so many other people. So there's clearly a sort of drop off in terms of your sensory experience prior to that level of practice, and what you're going to experience if you kind of give yourself a sort of battlefield promotion to that level of practice. You know, so there's a big difference between doing a small amount at home and doing a large amount in that kind of dedicated environment. But yeah, so about a week into it, I don't want to take up too much of everyone's time here by kind of stepping through my recollections live, because they come back in a different and irregular fashion. But there was there was a kind of disintegration of certain processes, and a really profound sense that everything that I was intellectually and consciously aware of previously was kind of I guess my own production, or something which had been created and maintained by myself, and that there was an actuality which preceded, enabled, and surrounded that, to which I was now better connected, if that makes any kind of sense. We're always on the margin of what we can do with language, I think, when we're talking about this stuff. So it's always fun to try and talk around those experiences. So that was wonderful, and the physical, the emotional, or what we might even call the spiritual sense of what was left behind after the protocols and processes which I had previously thought of as myself had abated, was a very loving, very clear, amazing, abundant feeling. And so the sense that this might be what underlies what we think of as human consciousness, and not just some ghastly empty void in which you don't exist, was a very powerful thing. And for me, and again, now we're going to get into sort of different terrain, something happened, which I suspect will be a function of my, well, you're always in the nature versus nurture argument with this stuff anyway, some aspect of my residual consciousness, or my operational consciousness, my ego, whatever terminology we need to use for that stuff, then fought back, you know, quite dramatically. And I began to sort of, that radically reversed itself, and my perception then became very, very fearful, and I became extremely afraid. That abated to a degree, but then I started having kind of, overwhelming hallucinations and shifts in perception, and various things. One thing led to another. It culminated, I guess, on the narrative level with me just insisting that I couldn't move or wouldn't be moved. You know, I was so convinced then of my complete connection to everything, some level of profound connectivity, that I had interpreted that, I think, through some form of kind of egoic pushback as meaning that I was so connected to everything in the universe that if I was to move or harm myself in any way, that in itself would be some sort of disastrous event. So I'd rationalize that into thinking, well, you can't do anything to me, I mustn't move, I mustn't speak. And so, not unreasonably, the people who were charged with my well-being in the real world, people running the retreat, did their best to try and do something about it. But in the end, they called the emergency services, and I ended up being taken away by the police, taken to hospital, and happily, you know, got myself together and was out of there a few days later. But so that was a radical acceleration of experience, which was only, I think, probably 9 months from first sitting to 15 minutes to going into Vipassana and doing that. And then the 18 months since that story took place in the summer of 2017. Yeah, that's right. It's a hard thing to come to terms with. There isn't a lot of information, and you guys are well experienced with this, and this is one of the reasons I'm happy to be doing this. There isn't a wealth of organised experience and community around for people when these things happen. And the people who organised the Vipassana retreat in that discipline, it's also very difficult. It's partly a question of the accessibility of those facilities, but also about what you go through as a human being emotionally when you've come out of something like that. There's a degree of confusion and shame, and it's actually, for me, it was quite hard to try and speak directly to the people that I felt I had been with. It's a very difficult thing as your personality starts to reassert itself, and so it's very confusing. So finding different places, different voices, mainly online, of people who've been through those experiences, and beginning to kind of feel less unusual, less like a failure, less like this was a symptom of an illness. Naturally, I had enough experience in my past as well. I'd kind of been to similar places through different routes. So my conviction that these things were part of some negative, unavoidable pathology was kind of shaken anyway. And for that, I am forever grateful. But so since then, yeah, it has been a period of accommodation. I do now have what I would call a much more discrete meditation practice. I'm alert to the fact that something inside of the way that I am doesn't respond to an attempt to shift it radically. I'll get moments of phenomenal clarity, but then there's a cause and effect relationship with how my psychology, my being puts itself together. So my approach now is much more measured and gentle. And I think with all this stuff, we're all so different. We have to find out what works for us. And sometimes the experience comes calling for you in a certain way. But in my case, if you go propelling yourself towards the experience, then you're going to accommodate and experience what comes for you in a very unique way. And you're going to bounce off that in ways that are totally unique to you. So, yeah, that's it. I hope I haven't spoken for too long there, but that's the gist of what happened to me.
Yeah, no, that's great, Michael. Thanks for sharing that. And I think that's exactly why we're here talking about this. You know, we're trying to understand how all of this comes together. These retreats that were going on with the intention of going in to find peace and being confronted with heaven, as you said in your article, and this overwhelming love, and then the pain and the chaos and the, you know, dissociation that comes from that, and then how that's interpreted through the lenses of mental health and the people who are intending to hold space for that but might not necessarily have the capabilities to manage it. So thank you for sharing. Okay, so we'll move into our next question. Elizabeth, did you want to ask that question?
Sure. So the question that I wanted us to talk around today was the issue in the concern that some people have in different religious perspectives that meditation is dangerous, that it's an opening for the devil or for evil spirits to take over and control you, that it's a dangerous place. So, you know, I live in West Texas, which is a very ultra conservative place, religiously, politically, economically, and so that's a concern that I hear a lot. Now, things have definitely shifted in the last 10, 12 years here. Meditation is seen in some circles, you know, as a simple mindfulness practice for mental health, but there's still that concern here. So my question was today, what is your response to that concern about it being a dangerous opening for evil? Mansell, would you like to speak to that?
Well, any long-term meditation practice is going to allow you to view inward. And so what you're going to encounter first and foremost are pieces of yourself. Whether your conditioning, your programming has condemned those things, has attached some negative perception to those impulses or those desires or those tendencies, you're going to encounter those as negative and sometimes borderline traumatic. The deeper that conditioning goes, the deeper you are, especially when fear is attached to that condition. You're so afraid that you're going to hell, that you're somehow falling under the influence of some demonic presence or things like that. Now, whether or not you encounter either deeper and deeper aspects of yourself or something outside of yourself, that's less of an issue than it is how you respond to it. Because whether it comes from deep inside of you or outside of yourself, you're going to respond to it the same way. And when it comes to approaching these things, simply observing, not casting judgment, trying to understand what these experiences, these negative experiences are, is the surest way to not allow yourself to be overwhelmed by it. Whether or not they're evil is whether or not you've labeled them evil deeply inside. However, again, any long-term meditation is going to cause you to reevaluate those systems of belief as well. So you're going to challenge those labels. You're going to encounter things that challenge those labels from inside of yourself. And so to cast this idea of meditation as a practice as evil, I think is a mistake, particularly if you're religiously devoted, because any kind of sincere prayer is going to be a form of meditation. Any kind of sincere participation in a ritual is a form of meditation. So labeling all of these things as somehow evil or opening the door to evil is a mistake. And even ritual and prayer, if you approach these things with real sincerity and the attempt to approach these with the whole of your being, which is actually the whole point of ritual, is to allow you to engage the entirety of yourself in a specific direction. If you allow that to happen, you're going to go deep. And so you're going to encounter parts of yourself that don't conform necessarily to your programming or have a negative place within your programming. And so, especially as I was saying earlier, I have PTSD. And so that kind of trauma lends itself to darkness, if you will. Lends itself to self-condemnation, lends itself to aspects that my own extremist conservative Christian programming of my youth labeled as deeply demonic or as I said, evil. It took me a long time to be able to accept those things and work through those things and even embrace those things and find out what's the core of that experience, what's the core of that image, what's the core of that vision, and discover that none of it was negative, none of it was hurtful. And in fact, even those darkest things were keys to my own growth. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So labeling something as evil can actually inhibit your growth. However, if your programming has labeled those things as evil, it's going to be very difficult for you to overcome those. So confronting your programming and trying not to judge that either is something that's important. Because if you're doing any kind of real intentional meditation, you're going to confront your programming. That's my answer.
Yeah, that's been my experience too, Mansell. And my takeaways from what you just said is that you're going to, if you're going to do a deep meditation practice, be prepared, right? That's one of the things that we need to educate people about. If you're going to enter into this, be prepared for the darkness that you might find as well, and have a way to be with that, and somebody that you can, that you trust to help you walk through that, I think is key as well. Right? Yeah. Michael, what is your perspective about this concern?
Well, it's fascinating to hear you guys talking, because I think you, sort of in terms of where you're located and also your experiences, you're in a much more, you have much more experience of an orthodox religious space than I do. My experiences came from a more kind of willfully secular place, if you like. So I don't hear that word evil applied directly around me. I think because I'm not. It's just it's very different living in this part of London than it is to living in your part of Texas. I'm pretty sure of that. The conversation I would have in the nearest bar is going to be different if I go in there and say, what are we talking about when we talk about evil tonight? So there's that conversation. There's the what do we talk about when we talk about evil conversation. And as I think Mansell has pointed out, that's different culturally, that's different on a community level, and ultimately it's going to be true to you. So yeah, I think there's every chance, like all kinds of kind of mythic scenes that you see in different kinds of storytelling, you probably are going to confront your version of evil, whatever you may take that to be at some point, if you're going to engage with something like this. Now, what someone in and around you, or within the framework of the literature and the world that you live in, what's their agenda when they start to allege that these practices might be evil is kind of a separate thing, really. And that they may be coming from that, or those arguments might be around as an attempt to protect you, because there is, as we all understand, I think, there is a danger to this. But I think, so someone might, but there's also a danger to any other kind of belief system you might be taking. So if to label things as evil is coming from someone who's invested in a particular system, they're probably, and not necessarily in a malign way, invested in the security of that system. And again, as Mansell said, you're going to have a questioning relationship with your belief system if you go and observe it and experience it with the distance and also the intimacy which meditation gives you. So you are going to go through some kind of potentially a crisis of faith. So anyone around you who has an interest in maintaining your faith as it is, or your participation as it is, and that might be someone who you think has, we want to characterize that person as evil, but it would be from the concern of a worried parent, because you're going to go through something that is going to cause you to sort of deconstruct and reconstruct certain aspects of your being, and certain systems of faith are kind of would prefer people didn't do that. A, because it's dangerous, and B, because it can often lead to some kind of shift. You might have a personal reformation, or whatever you want to, whatever you think of it as. And so there are those dangers there. And and if you're from a community where evil is, it is a more personified, regularly occurring concept, then that's a different kind of space. But I mean, the thing about meditation, at least in mine, is that as of itself, it's ambivalent. It's as ambivalent as medication, but it's at least as powerful, and possibly more so. It's not going to. There will be an effect, but it's coming from an experience which is happening to you and your system and your way of interpreting. It is neither this nor that, right? It simply is, at the risk of sounding willfully oblique there. And the terminology that we put on it is entirely our affair. And that in itself is challenging. It's much more comfortable to say it's good or bad, or that there is a thisness to it, when actually it's not quite that. You know, if that makes any sense, in my opinion.
Yes, Michael, thank you. It makes a lot of sense. You know, things that you both have said. I couldn't add anything more to that. I've just worked with people who have, you know, one of the challenges of having a spiritually transformative experience, however it comes to you, but especially through meditation and this neck of the woods, is that the damning, you get damned, you get shamed and guilted by your religious community, your church family, as they're called here, and that you're going to hell or that you're talking to the devil. And so when that happens to people, and their experiences, you know, as you said, are very unique, and you can't share them with somebody. As you said earlier, to language this is very difficult. So we can't take people into our experience and justify how they've changed us. And so this is one of the challenges people experience that has to be integrated uniquely and individually as to the change, their worldview that has changed because of their experiences. So it's a dilemma that's faced constantly. And yeah, so I think, you know, for me, like one of the fail safes I'd like to see about meditation practices is like a Surgeon General's warning, like on a pack of cigarettes. You know, meditation may change your worldview and reshape your relationships. Beware, right? Be prepared, and go in knowingly. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, and Elizabeth, that's exactly what our next question is pointing to is, you know, given the powerful shifts that we've had with meditation, knowing the shifts in consciousness it can induce, what are some of the parameters or what kind of education would you recommend practitioners find, or what can we offer people who are going down this path? What should we try to bring into our systems, to our meditation teachers, our yoga centers, our retreat centers? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So Elizabeth, Surgeon General's warning, anything beyond that you want to share?
Right. You know, this is a challenge because, as Michael said, there are people out there protecting their systems, even within the world of yoga and meditation. And I think really to provide education about spiritually transformative experiences and their challenges is what we need to be doing. We need to be taking the ACISTE education model about what the challenges are that people experience and how to help people integrate them, I think is good. I think our cultural competencies model for mental health professionals would be excellent training material for any yoga center, meditation retreat center, etc. I'd like to see our cultural competencies document used more broadly than perhaps just for mental health professionals, and then get people certified and trained in what to do for people.
Yeah, I agree. And that resource can be found on the ACISTE website if you're interested at ACISTE.org, the Cultural Competencies document. And I agree. And, you know, maybe that's another future conversation we can have specifically with yoga teachers and yoga centers, because I do think this is something that, again, our culture is starting to point toward, but we don't have the full understanding of all the openings that are possible here, and we don't have a framework to hold them. So thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, did you have another thought?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to confirm that, you know, we're seeing an increase in what is called, you know, the awakening process, right? But that's, you know, look at what yoga, from the time yoga hit the United States until now, and how it's disseminated more mainstream through yoga centers, right? And mindfulness practices, even from just a secular medical model, it's increased people's access to these different levels of consciousness and these different nonlinear, non-ordinary states of experience. Also, the recent, in the last 10 years, resurgence of the psychedelics, people having non-ordinary states of experience due to that. We see a resurgence of people being interested in meditation and having these types of experiences. We've got to up our education. We've got to promote education more than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Mansell, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, to continue on with the idea of being culturally sensitive, we also need to be aware that people, especially now, are almost inherently multicultural, especially here in the West. We're exposed to a number of different things that, and on a deep level. So our working models, the ways that we have oriented ourselves in regards to the world, in regards to ourselves, in regards to the universe, is it may have a cultural basis, but it is also very, very personal. And so for the practitioner, the understanding that even if you've rejected your background, you've rejected your programming, you've rejected your religion, you're going to encounter it. You're going to have to confront it because those things have left an indelible mark on your psyche, on who you are. And so being sensitive and aware and prepared to do that, to have feelings of guilt resurface, to have things that you thought you have dealt with resurface and have to deal with all over again, just on a different level. And the understanding that as you move through these levels of yourself, as you move through these deeper experiences of meditation, you're very often going to have to reconfront these things all over. As for somebody coaching, somebody who is aiding somebody to go deep, who's being a counselor, so on and so forth, being sensitive to the person and resisting the urge to cast them in a stereotype, in a preconceived notion. Yes, they may have a Christian background. Yes, they may have this other background, but that does not mean they fit all of these categories within that system. So in dealing with somebody who's going through these things, be inquisitive and open to the way they express themselves, and to help them at every stage and level of growth be able to reconstruct a working model, to reconstruct a new orientation. That will eventually be challenged. And that's something else that somebody who's trying to take somebody through these different levels of growth needs to understand that at every level of growth, you're going to challenge the previous one, and you're going to challenge who you are all over again. So one of the things that is really, really hard to do, but I think is absolutely necessary when you're looking to grow in this way, is letting go of certainty, letting go of absolute belief, letting go of these things, which of course itself is a major process, but at least being willing to be wrong, being willing to let go of strongly held beliefs, as I said, certainty. Because since our own awareness, our senses, our inner awareness is so limited just by the very nature of our existence, we're always wrong to some degree or another. In any opinion that we hold, we're always wrong. So if we're holding that opinion with absolute certainty, we're holding a wrong opinion on some level with absolute certainty, and it will inhibit your growth. So being willing, and that's something that again, somebody who's coaching somebody through these levels needs to do, is to reinforce gently in a way that is conducive to that specific person, to continually loosen their grip on certainty. That doesn't mean necessarily letting go of your beliefs, because your beliefs are something that you have at any given time, and they will evolve. But applying the burden of certainty to your opinions and beliefs is a sure way to do damage to yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Mansell. Well said. We don't realize that often this spiritual journey, if that's your intention, or even if it's just your intention to make this a way to bring some inner peace and stress reduction, meditation is the gateway. There's so much that we can be challenged to let go of, and certainty, of course. We think we know so much until we realize we don't know much. So, yeah. Michael, what are your thoughts in terms of education, resources, ideas to help build some container to hold all of these possibilities?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would only echo what Elizabeth and Mansell have said, really, and I think speak to something that you've mentioned a couple of times, which is that I think it would certainly be helpful to kind of rein in, insofar as this is even possible, the kind of public relations, or that suggests someone's behind it, that's not even the word, but there's a driven and very present perception now about what meditation is good for. It's definitely good for you, and it's going to do these things for you, and it's going to help you become more successful, and tiny incremental things. It's like a version of going to the gym. It's marketed somewhere between the way cigarettes used to be advertised, and there's all kinds of odd things you see now, and it's sort of algorithmically out of hand. Like, even if you go and read my piece online, which is, you know, speaking explicitly to some of the less often discussed outcomes, the ads that even the website of the magazine of Esquire finds are promoting meditation holidays and apps and stuff like that. The two are literally coexisting. My computer thinks, because I'm interested in one aspect of it, the advertising and the promotion that I get to all these kind of benign, seemingly benign spin-off products around it, that over 1,000, 1,300 apps or something I could potentially have on one's phone that do all this stuff. So we're living in this kind of deluge of a kind of superficial relationship with it, which is not to say that there isn't a way of, you know, potentially having a relationship with it which could yield small, incremental, positive results. But at the same time, it's like, it's, as we said, the sheer ambivalence of it, and the good news, the immensely efficacious force of what you're engaging with here, or what you're disengaging with, whichever way we slice it, is, as Elizabeth was saying, something that people need to understand. It's like what's the weather like at the beach today? You're going off into the ocean, but at the same time, just as Mansell was saying, you also are that ocean. So don't pretend that there isn't potentially a drop-off, whether you stay in your own shallows, and that's going to depend on your sort of inner geography, to push the analogy somewhat. So yeah, I think we need to try and, through these conversations, somehow rescue or at least reframe the whole concept of potential outcomes here, which I think in an immensely positive way. It's powerful because it's powerful, but it's also powerful. You know, I realize I'm just essentially repeating the word powerful there, but it's, you know, but it's not powerful like detergent powerful. This isn't like something that's going to get the sink of your mind shinier necessarily, although maybe that too. It's as powerful as if you then drank all the detergent as well. It can go that way. So it's just about having that kind of thing. And then in terms of integrating the experience, I think that's an interesting one in itself, because I don't know if I would say that I had, in a strict linguistic sense, been able to integrate mine. I mean, I miss certain aspects of it because it was so extreme. When I'm back, you know, on my way to work, or trudging around, or dealing with day-to-day stuff, I wish I was back in the sort of clear and seemingly euphoric spaces that I'd seen before. I'd rather that was my day-to-day experience. At least I imagine that's what it was like. So I think we also need to be careful that there isn't a competitive aspect, because this can equally go the other way, where people are being sold the idea of some transformative thing, and if they don't get that quickly, like most modern human things, then there'll be other frustration there. I also now, I know there's I guess it's also potentially probably more of a sort of, I don't want to generalize here, but more of a masculine thing. I can sense there's like a competitive thing about how much meditation people have done, what kind of results you've got, have you had a terribly significant experience? So we can't help but this is already escaping into the kind of competitive, consumerist, capitalistic framework in which we dwell. So all those problems are kind of coexistent within it. And the more those of us who kind of seen a bit can flag out and go, well, it ain't necessarily so, think on a minute, then we can extricate people from kind of co-opting this thing into, you know, into the everyday madness that probably drove them to it in the first place. So yeah, I think we have to keep speaking to that, as well as normalizing the difficult outcomes. We also need to normalize the idea that some people might not like it. Maybe this isn't for you, you know, because that can create a lot of negativity around an idea as well. If people aren't comfortable with it, that's cool. They'll be comfortable with it. You know, it's not panacea. It's not for everyone, and it's not that someone is better for having had one of these experiences that's gone a certain way or anything like that. It's there, and you know, we just need to have like we said, a better conversation about it. Hopefully this is part of that conversation. But yeah, from a simple health warning, just to kind of pushing back somewhat against some of the sort of the propaganda around what it appears to be, but actually isn't. That can only be good.
Yeah, Michael, such good thoughts about just how, as Westerners in our individualistic mindset, we tend to package it and promote it and understand it, and it becomes competitive and goal-oriented. And I think that's a really good point about, you know, how can we open that up? And that's actually the next question I have here is, you know, how can we view and understand meditation as a practice that can be beneficial for the collective and not just the individual? Because we're going into meditation seeking a state beyond the self. So it seems like by nature we're connecting with something that's out there for everyone, and yet, like you said, Michael, we tend to filter back through the view of the individual. So let's talk to this idea of looking at meditation as something that can be beneficial for the collective as well as the individual. Does anyone feel called to begin on that? Yeah.
Yeah, well, something came up for me immediately. I mean, so when I first started meditating, the first thoughts I had were of that nature. It was the kind of tyrannical, what are you doing sitting here? The world's a terrible place. That you could be doing the washing up. There's certainly you haven't finished your work, or there are people out there in the world. Anything is better than this. That was the inner narrative for me. You should immediately go and go to the worst place in the world and help people before you sit in your own room and do nothing, right? There's a whole tyranny of narrative against that, or at least there was for me. And if you're able to observe that, then that becomes interesting in itself. And that's hopefully is the beginning of the end of that kind of thinking. But I think to the wider point here, we are, I hope, of better use to the collective once some of the potentially beneficial effects of meditation have come to bear upon ourselves. There is a limited value, although, you know, I mean, listen, lots of great stuff happens for necessarily not great reasons. There are many people who give huge, life-changing sums of money to charity out of terrible guilt. Let's not detract from the complexity of the human experience here. But I think if you're going to go into meditation and you want to either still that inner voice, or potentially if you want to talk about your practice with other people who will be going, well, how could you do that when this is that way and that's that way? And we'll tell you that it's a selfish, introspective retreat. And obviously the word retreat is very much part of the vocabulary here. I think we are driven to these practices, if we're not driven, if we didn't, or as I was, didn't grow up with them, because I had got to a point where I felt I wasn't functional within some very close relationships and within the wider relationship with every other human being. I was questioning very much what I was here for, you know, all that primal doubt stuff that people go through. And then I found experientially and through shared discourse and through literature and study that one of the great things here, and one of the key aspects of many different disciplines of monastic practice, is not only to be an example of what human beings can be when they have managed to exit some of the push and pull of the whole fear and desire and all of that inner narrative, then maybe you can do a good thing in a calm way, or maybe through calmness you can stop doing less discursive, dissonant things. And those tiny actions, those tiny inactions, I think are the beginning of real progress. You know, it starts at a very simple level. It starts at the kitchen sink level, and those are also the first results I think that person will be able to see. If it takes you 2 seconds longer to get angry at a traffic light, or with your partner, or with your elderly parent, or with your kid, then that's positive, and that's having a collective benefit. And I think it's our desire to see tangible, manifestable, here it is on a pie chart, on a graph, results. It's also kind of debilitating. But I would optimistically assert that through even a modest amount of practice, it's it's a world of small differences, and through those small differences, great change comes to bear. So that's my rebuttal to people saying, well, you're just sat in a room thinking about yourself. Yes, but on everyone's behalf.
Yes, I love it. On everyone's behalf, absolutely. Elizabeth Mansell, tell us your thoughts about collective potential here for meditation.
Well, I'd like to speak to this because it's a fun one. I agree with Michael. This idea that to paraphrase, building yourself, growing yourself is going to inevitably affect everyone around you, everything around you. And you know, you can look at it in different ways, and it depends on what you bring to well, what your purpose for practicing meditation is. If you're just looking to relax a little more, or maybe do a little bit of therapy, nothing deep. It's like going to the gym. You're a little bit healthier, you're a little bit happier, you carry yourself a little bit differently in the world. If you choose to go deeper, if that's something that either you're drawn to or simply happens, it also produces things like mercy, compassion, and understanding. And so you walk through the world with a little bit more wisdom, with a little bit more understanding. So when it comes to individual versus collective, it's a simple fact that we all, well, not all of us, I guess, but many of us who practice meditation for any length of time experience that interconnectedness of all things. And so we can experience that thing on a deeper level, and that leads us to deeper levels of forgiveness, understanding, deeper levels of mercy, grace, as well as an understanding of when it's the right time to take a stand, and what taking a stand for actually means, what the benefit cost ratio between taking a stand would be. All of these things are things that come out of a deeper understanding of ourselves and other people, which is something that especially long-term forms of meditation practice can aid us in. Again, we also potentially can confront our certainties, and when we let go of our certainties, a lot of our prejudices will at least be questioned, if not directly challenged. So it's almost an expression of simple misunderstanding of what's going on. This idea that you're just sitting there concentrating on yourself, because we look at the world through our own eyes. We interpret the world through our own understanding and our own programming. So even when we're watching TV or interacting with another person, you can argue that we're actually doing so with ourselves on some extent. And so the more we understand that process, and the more we understand ourselves, the more likely we're going to be able to get out of our own way, and get out of the way of others who are in our vicinity or in our community or and beyond. So meditation is both individual and collective, just in its inherent nature.
Thanks, Mansell. Great thoughts. Elizabeth, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I don't know if there's anything to add. They both stated it so succinctly and completely. You cannot separate the individual from the collective. And as for those that do the deeper work in meditation and have gone through the agony of recognizing our disassociated, fragmented selves that we found in meditation, and did the work of giving ourselves compassion, grace, and mercy, understanding for ourselves, it makes us much more capable of doing that for others. We quit projecting those fragmented, disassociated parts, blaming other people for those, blaming ourselves. So that projection of blame ebbs away. And as you practice, those negative projections go away internally and externally. And so that creates a silence in your own mind, a peace in your own being that you carry with you wherever you go. And that influences and affects those that are ready to be influenced and affected by it, noticed by it, that energy of silence within your own psyche and emotional body. And so as the Dr. David Hawkins would say, as the ocean rises, the boats that are on the ocean rise as well. So as the collective, as those who meditate deeply are able to affect their own consciousness, they affect the consciousness of those around them. And it doesn't mean that there's peace outside, right? And I think that's maybe one of the inherent challenges of meditation for beginners, is they expect that when they start a meditation practice that they're going to find peace. And what they find are these fragmented pieces of themselves. So the peace comes as we continue to do the work that both of these gentlemen have talked about, you know, that coming back to our wholeness and our connection to one another comes back in a way that cannot be denied for the individual. I had an experience at my very first silent meditation retreat was at a Buddhist abbey in Northern California. And silence had been calling me. I'd been seeking silence. I knew that silence was really important. So I thought that going to a silent meditation retreat would do the trick. And I laughed because, you know, what do you meet? You meet yourself. And I couldn't wait to get out of there. And when I did leave, one of the monks said to me, "Be very gentle with yourself." And I thought, oh my God, you know, I had so many judgments about what are these people doing here? Walking around. I was one of those people that judged him even though it had called me. You know, what are these people doing? They don't do anything. They just take care of themselves. They're not doing anything for the world. But I was given a vision a couple miles down the road after I'd left the abbey. And I saw that the energy that these people had created by their practice actually created like an energy umbrella over the planet that held all that goodness down into the Earth's atmosphere, where anybody in distress could reach up into that and access mercy, compassion, understanding, and love. And that they performed a great service. And so my judgment, you know, ebbed away after that experience and had a very visceral understanding of the benefit to the collective and to the planet itself. So, yeah, we're all connected.
Yeah, and that is an absolutely beautiful share of that vision. What a gorgeous way to recognize what's happening beyond what the eye can see, beyond the material idea of these individuals sitting there selfishly engrossed in their own minds. So thanks for that. So I think we have a couple of questions from the viewers. Elizabeth, do you have a sense of which question you want to cover first?
Sure, we just have one right now. So if anybody else has any questions they'd like to ask of the panelists, please go to the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen and click on that. You can type in the question. This question is, do you think experiencers, it's not really about meditation, but I guess it's related to cultural competency maybe. Do you think experiencers are more likely to seek out help from psychics and intuitives rather than from mental health therapists due to a fear of being misdiagnosed and labeled? Gentlemen, what's your take on that?
That's actually a really good question. I think it depends on who you are and how you've been exposed to the mental health industry and your assumptions about alternative spirituality and those elements. However, very often the first step, especially for people who come from a religious background, is going to be in a religious or spiritual direction. whether that's looking at a religious counselor or if they've already gone through or begun the process of challenging their own religious background, looking for some kind of alternative in that way. I think that's more a result of your conditioning than it is, I think, the experience. Now, I do know that finding a mental health professional who is aware of and trained in dealing with this kind of thing is almost invaluable. It's because they bring into it a deeper education, a more long-term, more in-depth framework on how to address these things. Typically, especially if they are secular and not religious, they tend to not try to impose a specific interpretation on your experiences, and rather will work to lead you to understand your own experiences. Now, there are some in the alternative spirituality community that will do the same. However, both are really important to understand other routes of interpreting these things given other structures, but also being led into your own interpretation. So to directly reiterate my answer to the question, it's going to depend on where you're from in regards to your own personal programming, whether or not you seek first a spiritual or religious interpretation of these experiences or a medical professional.
Yeah, I agree, Mansell. And I do want to let people know that are watching that we do have mental health professionals, spiritual guidance directors, and coaches that are trained and certified by ACISTE. So please do go to our website and look under our resource directory. Again, that's www.aciste.org. You can go to the resource directory. And if you're already seeing a mental health professional and you want to have them educated, go to the website on the left-hand side, down more resources. It'll talk, you can click on the cultural competencies document and it'll open it up. You can download it and email it to your mental health professional and send them our way. Yep. We have one more quick question maybe before we close. Does meditation get us in touch with the fact that there is more to us than our egoic mind, which is consciousness? Michael, would you like to respond to that first?
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, yes, I think if you're lucky, yeah, I think it does. Yeah, and that's one of the primary. Is it in effect? I don't know. Again, I'm sort of struggling with the linguistic aspects of it here. Yeah, I'm reading an interesting book at the moment that described, our kind of egoic consciousness as being about, if our mind is about the size of a beach ball, then our egoic consciousness is about the size of a tennis ball. And the revelation that feels about right, which I think anyone who's done much meditation would subscribe to at least some version of that model. That's a helpful thing because it will take you back to what Mansell was talking about realizing that it's not about a sense of, if it gets you in touch with the idea that there is more to this than what you thought there was, then as of itself, the progress and as you hopefully develop a benign relationship with, with the sense of being that you begin to experience through meditation and begin to let go maybe of the sense of being you probably developed through most childhoods, which is a kind of defensive attempt to assert yourself, often under quite difficult circumstances, and potentially start to look beyond the model, which has probably served you reasonably well until the moment that it didn't any longer, and you went looking for something different. If that's your route into it, then yeah, I think that's the great entry level blessing. If that's the least you take from it, that's a substantial shift in consciousness, which might sound like a grandiose way of looking at it, but that's exactly what it is. And there's nothing to be feared there. And I think for most people, that should come as a welcome relief. So yes, I think that certainly in my experience, that's been a great thing. It was like a load off. I felt it was like some sort of inner gravity was dispelled. You don't have to take yourself so seriously anymore, which is not to say there aren't serious things attached to it, but who doesn't want to do that?
Thank you, Michael. Mansell?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's kind of the point of what we're talking about. I don't remember who said it, but I remember hearing a statement in regards to all of this subject, that it's all in your head, but you have no idea how big your head is. So the idea of just looking inward is something that is foreign to many of us, and so looking inward, you're going to almost immediately encounter elements of yourself that are deeper than your consciously aware of, that your awareness is normally focused on. Just that act will immediately take you deeper. If this practice is continued long term or with any kind of intention, you're looking at, as we've talked about, you're looking at elements of yourself that you both praise and condemn. So yes, absolutely yes, but you need to be prepared for what you find, because you may not like yourself on different levels, and different aspects of yourself may be very traumatic to the way you perceive of yourself currently. So approaching this with caution, approaching this with the determination to give yourself grace, is something that is necessary, simply because the answer to this question is a simple and emphatic yes.
Thank you, gentlemen, so much. I'm going to turn it over to Katrina to do some announcements before we say goodbye today.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And thank you both, Mansell and Michael, for being with us and taking the time to share your personal experiences and help give us some insight and input into where we're heading with all of this as a collective together, trying to lend support and help people meet their integration needs. And Elizabeth, thank you for sharing with us as a panelist. You're the mastermind behind these conversations. I think it's such a wonderful way to engage in this discussion together, and it's great to hear you share a little bit more about yourself. So I'm really glad that you were called to do that today. If you'd like to join us in Atlanta at our next conference, we'd love to have you. We talk about the therapeutic issues of spiritually transformative experiences like the ones we spoke about today. It's all research-based, and our primary target is helping professionals, mental health professionals. So that will be in Atlanta, November 14 through 16, 2019. And you'll be able to find more information about that on our website soon. We're putting the details together, but save the date if it interests you. And in the meantime, our next community conversation for March will be on the 21st. And we're going to be talking about psychedelics. It's become a topic that there's more research on, and something that is also triggering experiences that have integration needs after. And again, a lot of the people who are seeking these experiences are not always given the community support they need to bring what their wisdom is back into their lives and manage any challenges that have come up. So we're looking forward to getting that panel together and having you join us on March 21st for that. And again, check out our website, ACISTE.org, ACISTE.org. You can find those cultural competency guidelines there. And again, share them with your therapists, with your coaches who might be able to benefit from them as well. And yeah, if you are looking for a professional to get some help, again, like Elizabeth mentioned earlier, we do have people that are trained specifically through ACISTE in helping people work with these experiences. So look on our website and you can find somebody in your area who can help you with that. And we also have our peer experiencer forum, which is a private forum where people can share openly about their experiences. And you're welcome to sign up to join that again on our website. So thank you all for being with us today. It was a really great conversation, and we look forward to doing it again soon. Have a good day.